Rewatch Podcast presents the Wilder and Pryor Rewatch.
I don't believe this! Are you kidding?
Join us each week as we discuss the 4 films featuring comedy greats Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor.
The man's got something to say, let him say it.
Up yours!
Silver Streak,
This is fabulous!
Stir Crazy,
Jesus! You could have mustache!
See No Evil, Hear No Evil,
This is a scandal. What do you mean I'm not white? Why didn't you tell me this before?
and Another You.
You screwed my brain.
Send your feedback to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. Like our Facebook page, facebook.com/rewatchpodcast, and follow us on Twitter @rewatchpod.
Just pick up the phone and call your superiors. Tell them I have the Rembrandt letters.
Today we're discussing Stir Crazy, starring Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor, George Stanford Brown, Jo Beth Williams, Miguel Angel Suarez, Craig T. Nelson, Barry Corbin, Joel Brooks, and Jonathan Banks. Directed by Sidney Poitier.
I've always wondered how you pronounce that last name. I'm glad you did it.
Welcome back to the Rewatch Podcast. I'm Corey, and we don't want no shit. Do you understand? We don't take too much shit. We take a little bit, but we don't take no monster shit.
Nice. There's a lot of shits in that sentence, man. And I'm Nathan, and I want a bigger cell with better ventilation. And let me just say, before we go too far, we're here to talk about the film Stir Crazy. And I actually thought maybe for my opening line, I was thinking about doing that sound that Gene Wilder makes when he panics. Have you noticed that? Like, he does it twice in the film, and he just goes, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sometimes it's really loud. Sometimes it's just really subtle, but yeah, it's usually just like a, oh.
Yes. I thought about that, but I decided against it because I knew I couldn't do it justice. Anyway, as I said, we're here to talk about Stir Crazy. So how about we just get into the trailer?
Let's do it.
I hereby sentence you to serve 125 years.
Have you got the right case?
Columbia Pictures presents Gene Wilder and Richard
I
Pryor
have my head overhauled for listening to you.
together again in Stir Crazy.
I can't feel nothing in my leg.
One's a little too good.
That's Grossberger, the biggest mass murder in the history of the Southwest.
Nobody has ever just sat down and honestly talked with that man. Hello.
One's not quite bad enough.
They got this Korean doctor just set foot in this country. Make sure you don't get him. That's right. He's the one made the mistake on me.
Korean.
How do you go?
That's the cat did me.
Could you actually become involved, romantically, with a prisoner?
Absolutely not.
Oh, I didn't think so.
Excuse me, will you?
I'll come with you.
Oh,
Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor in Stir Crazy. Only these two guys could dress up like woodpeckers and get framed for robbing a bank. Stir Crazy.
that's right, we bad.
Imagine all the possibilities if the whole world was just like me.
All right, welcome back. I hope you're all enjoying our Wilder and Pryor rewatch. As we said before, we're here to talk about Stir Crazy, and we should probably get into some trivia, yeah?
Yeah, so this is the second foray between Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, and this actually came out on December 12th of 1980. So it's been a couple of years since they did Silver Streak, but this one is actually the most profitable of the 4 films they did together. With a budget of $10 million, it raked in just a smidge over $100 million, which it was actually the first film directed by an African-American man to break the $100 million mark. So very interesting.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a monster hit.
Mm.
It would have made huge money. And I think I read Richard Pryor got paid $1 million for this film, but actually took some back-end kind of profits. Yeah, it was Richard Pryor's first $1 million paycheck movie. Moreover, Pryor actually received points to the value of 10% of the gross. So it was a very, very profitable day for Richard Pryor. And back in 1980, $10 million, man, that was big money. Yeah,
I know. On top of the $1 million, he got paid to actually do the movie. So $11 million to be in this film.
I can't quite work out why this was a monster hit, but I think we spoke about it briefly in our last episode, but you really got to go back to Richard Pryor's kind of star power. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
I mean, Gene Wilder obviously was coming off success, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Richard Pryor was like a big, big star, and he appealed to a very wide demographic, didn't he? And he kind of brought those people to the theater.
Oh, yeah, and it was his stand-up. He did live stand-up, so, these are the kind of things where people paid to get tickets to come to it, so that, he definitely had an audience out there. So people, they were shelling out to see some Richard Pryor.
Yeah, absolutely, and they were loving it. Although I have read that as much as Richard Pryor was a incredibly funny guy, he was very, very difficult behind the scenes. Apparently, according to Gene Wilder's autobiography, one day during filming, the craft service department was actually serving watermelon, and some of the crew members began playfully throwing pieces of it at each other. Apparently, a piece of watermelon landed at Pryor's feet, and Pryor got so cranky that Pryor only returned to the film after the crew member that threw the piece was fired. And I think the reasoning was that Pryor somehow come up with the connotation that African Americans were known to be eating watermelon, and he thought it was like a racist kind of slur against him. And he demanded the crew members got fired, which is a bit tough, but it is what it is.
Yeah, well, I also saw this thing, this came from Greg Ferrera from Turner Classic Movies, and he said that Pryor, during this period, he was quite erratic and paranoid, mostly because his bodyguard had admitted that Pryor free basic cocaine pretty much every night during the filming of this film. So, apparently he was, by this point, he was a very difficult man to deal with. But, hey, I guess maybe he kind of took his craft a bit seriously.
Well, I think he did too. And as much as, as we said before, he was a superstar back in the day, he's kind of one of those guys that I kind of wish I didn't really know all that much about, because, and I probably shouldn't be too judgmental, but he doesn't sound like the nicest guy behind the scenes, and he sounds like he was difficult. Apparently he was famous for showing up late and being really quite demanding on the crew and the director, and just kind of throwing his kind of star power around. And I mean, obviously a lot of this is gossip, and it's kind of hard to kind of gauge whether a lot of it is true or not true or whatever it might be. But even if a small amount of it's true, it's kind of uncool. And he doesn't sound like the most professional guy in the world. And as I said, I probably shouldn't be too mean-spirited, because he was a very funny guy and a very influential guy. And he was a big star at the time. But his difficult nature, I reckon he would have been frustrating to work with, from a crew perspective, director, producer, you name it. He would have been hard to kind of handle. Yeah,
and from what I understand, Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor were actually meant to re-team again only a couple of years after this for the film Hanky Panky in 1982, which was directed by Sidney Poitier, who of course directed this film. So it was it was going to be the team that had such a huge success with this. I mean, like I said, $100 million, third highest grossing film of the year. They wanted to try and strike that lightning again with Hanky Panky, but Pryor, he pretty much just walked away from the project. He just really didn't want to have anything to do with it at that time, and actually his role was rewritten as the female lead, played by Gilda Radner in that film. So,
who coincidentally, I believe Gene Wilder was married to. I think they were partners up until Gilda Radner's death in the mid-80s.
And most people would know her from SNL.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, she again, she was a superstar back in the day. And, obviously her and Wilder would have been a bit of a star kind of, they would have wielded some comedy power, yeah?
And we'll get into it when we discuss the next film, but it is actually a fair few years that go by before we see the two of them team up again.
The film was actually also nominated for a Razzie Award for Worst Supporting Actress for George Stanford Brown in Drag, which I can only presume is the bit towards the end, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, we'll get to it.
There is some talk as well that apparently a lot of the scenes between Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder were actually improvised, which, I mean, I certainly wouldn't have known that. I mean, they do have a very good chemistry together, don't they?
They do. And knowing that bit of information, I mean, when you go back and you sort of see how they kind of just let go to do what they do together and just bounce off each other, you can really see it, you know? And, you know, whether or not they were given some sort of scene direction or something like that by Sidney Poitier, you'd like to think that they would be. But, yeah, you know, when you know it, you can see it, you know, and I don't know, it kind of just gives the film a natural quality.
I think we mentioned earlier on that this film made $100 million back in 1980. It was the third highest grossing film of 1980, only behind The Empire Strikes Back and 9 to 5, which starred Dolly Parton, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
A film that I remember seeing many years ago and I have not revisited. Anyway, that's another story.
Yeah, and I love this bit of trivia too. Now, this film and the previous film we talked about, Silver Streak, had Gene Wilder build over Richard Pryor. And of the 4 films they did together, after this, the next 2, it'll be Pryor who is first build, and then Gene Wilder, which is interesting, you know. Let's go back to that, maybe that star power or something like that.
I think that's about it, man. Is there any other trivia you kind of want to mention, or is that about it, you reckon?
No, I think that's about it. You know, it seems like the behind the scenes is a lot of the actors have talked about it over the years, and I think most of the people from this film come away thinking that it was a pretty pleasant experience, regardless of Pryor's behavior.
Whenever I kind of think of Stir Crazy, I gotta say, it was always one of those films I remember like seeing at the VHS store. I remember seeing like the poster of them two in the chicken suit, and to be truthful, obviously the chicken suit's important. It's not very representative of like the whole film itself, is it?
It really isn't.
Like, truthfully, the chicken suits is like it's a small part of the film. It's only in there for about 2 minutes, yeah?
Exactly. And that's the thing, too, is that most people would say they're chicken suits. They're not even chicken suits at the end of the day either. They were like woodpeckers or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's a weird thing to have for the front cover.
Anyway, it is what it is. All right, shall we get into our plot discussion?
Yeah, let's do it. We pick up, actually, in New York City with this, I don't know, it's a song? And it's obviously sung by Gene Wilder. It's like the Stir Crazy song, like a theme song.
They do this montage, don't they?
Of like what it's like to be a New Yorker, like people don't care about everybody else and whatnot.
As we kind of get through this, you know, what it's like to be in New York song, that I actually didn't really pick up on the fact that Gene Wilder sang it, but do you think he did?
I really think he did. I think it's like listening to it, I'm like, it's almost, I don't know, I thought it was super obvious, but maybe not.
Fair enough. I just don't think, I must have been zoning out when I was listening to it.
From the get-go?
No, maybe not from the get-go. I think I was just waiting for our 2 heroes to show up.
Right.
So, it's all right. But we get introduced pretty quickly to our 2 main guys, which is we meet a down on his luck. You kind of get that impression, don't you? Down on his luck kind of writer, Skip Donahue, and actor Harry Monroe. They get fired from their jobs in New York City, and there's like this really long sequence where they kind of meet up in a bar. We kind of have that sequence too at the start where we actually meet Harry Monroe, and he's like a waiter. His introduction to the whole movie is him waiting on what appears to be like an exclusive kind of lunch of some description.
Yeah, like just some aristocratic woman is having a dinner party, and like the priest is there and all her rich friends, and he's the waiter.
Without me going into like racial stereotypical roles, like remember we spoke about this in Silver Streak, how all the train staff were like black and all the passengers were, not all of them, but the vast majority were just clearly like wealthy white people. And the trend continues in Stir Crazy a little bit, which I do find surprising because, I mean, this is directed by, you know, the very famous Sidney Poitier. So I'm surprised he kind of sustained those stereotypes a little bit, yeah?
Yeah, but it makes for a funny sequence because really the gag here is that he's out there serving everybody. And they're having like a really great time and talking about what an excellent salad they've made.
Yes.
And he goes back into the kitchen to get more salad because they just want more salad. And they find that one of the hapless women there, who's working with the chef, has inadvertently taken weed out of Harry's bag, thinking it was oregano.
Yeah, because they set it up because the head chef picks up some sauce and she tastes it. She goes, "It needs more oregano." The maid goes over and just grabs some, and then she grabs it and goes, "What's this? This is not my oregano." And where did you get this from? And then it dawns on her that she grabbed it from the waiter's bag. Anyway, all hell breaks loose, and Richard Pryor comes in, and at first he's kind of cranky that they just used up all his stash. And he keeps going on about how it's like 65 something or whatever, like, you know what I mean? And
yeah, like grown in Africa or something.
This is the best weed you can find, like, all around town, and you've just used half of it in the main meal. Meanwhile, they go out, like, Richard Pryor goes outside, and all of them are just off their chops, aren't they? Totally.
Yeah, and he's just trying to, like, convince the priest that he's maybe had too much wine, and he's like randomly filling up some woman next to him or something. Like, what a weird sequence.
I know. It's a really, really strange sequence. And we get from there back to the bar, and then Harry meets up with his friend Skip, and we kind of meet Skip, and Skip is this really strange kind of guy. Like, he's a writer. He's a bit of a dreamer.
He thinks he can be a playwright on Broadway.
Yes, but he's kind of down on his luck, and I think he's a little bit over New York City because he's been there for too long. He hasn't had a break, and he's trying to convince Harry that it's time to leave New York City. It's a little unclear. Like Harry and Skip, they're mates, but they're pretty close mates, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they kind of maybe live together as well.
It never really gets explained, does it, why they're together.
Yeah, but Skip is, like, such a weird character because he was working as a store detective, you know, just keeping an eye out for the shoplifters.
I kept trying to think of what job he got fired from, because you're right, because we have the same sequence where he meets up and he goes up to this random woman, and it's like he's almost delivering kind of really bad pickup lines, isn't he? And he keeps sort of saying, "I saw you in that play and you were really great," and all this kind of stuff, but I actually know for a fact that underneath your dress you don't have anything on underneath there, do you? And she gets totally offended, doesn't she?
I know, and they don't even make it clear whether or not she was shoplifting. He just shows up at the bar and goes, "Hey, I got fired today." So I guess maybe you just assumed that she wasn't shoplifting after all that.
I mean, I don't know. It felt a bit strange, but throughout the whole film, Skip has this really unusual kind of energy where he's actually bordering on slightly inappropriate in so many kind of situations.
It's so weird because he thinks that, like, they're so down and out and they're over New York City, but he's like a total player. Like, women just come up to him and kiss him and you stop him and say, "Hey, call me sometime." It's like he's a total player and a ladies' man, but he just doesn't seem to, like, notice or care.
No, he doesn't.
It's bizarre.
You're right. So we get from New York City, he convinces Harry that it's time to get out of there, and they're racing across the country. We kind of end up in this, I think their car kind of breaks down at some point, and they end up in this random kind of town, and we end up in another bar. Like, straight away. Again, he's like dreaming, and he's trying to talk about, like, the American dream and what it's like to be a cowboy, and he sees these two guys kind of hitting this boxing bag, and he kind of goes up to them and doesn't proposition them, but he kind of asks them very out of the ordinary kind of questions that are totally inappropriate. But he's just asking questions. Like, I don't think he's being mean or nasty. He's just ignorant. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, I think what he's doing, being a writer, is that he wants to meet people and get to know people. So so he walks up to these two dudes, completely unaware that these two dudes would probably just, like, beat the shit out of him or something like that. And it doesn't actually work out very good for them because they get jobs. They're in Arizona. They were heading to Hollywood. So they've broken down in Arizona here. And they get these jobs as woodpeckers to do some sort of promotional song and dance at a bank. And those two guys from the bar steal their costumes, go into the bank, and then rob it. So they get framed for robbing this bank.
Skip to the court trial, and Harry and Skip are going through this relatively speedy trial, and you actually meet the lawyer. Now, did that lawyer look familiar to you, man? He looked familiar to me. I'm not too sure where I kind of know him from, but he had just one of those 80s kind of faces, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Like someone you may have seen, like, in the last 15, 20 years But much older, of course.
Much older. And like, I'm pretty sure he's been in like dozens of things that I've kind of watched, but he's kind of one of those guys that you just would never know his name.
Yeah, exactly. He's that guy.
Yeah.
But
anyway.
There's apparently like a whole thing about like really cracking down on crimes, like non-violent crimes or something. So there's just this super speedy trial and they get sentenced to a 125-year sentence in jail. So they're just thrown in jail.
125 years. And this is where we kind of go back to Gene Wilder doing his panicking sound, which just makes me laugh. It's hard to explain, and I don't want to do it because it's kind of bordering on ridiculous. But Gene Wilder just makes it work. It's very, very funny. And the court-appointed lawyer that they go, it's very stereotypical. Like, he's clearly not the best lawyer in town, is he? This guy?
No, and I don't think he quite knows what to do with these guys because Harry he's naturally freaking out. but Skip, again, like he just seems so nonchalant about it. Like he's loving it. Like, oh, I'm getting great material, and he's writing it down. And this is quite an experience. He turns to him at one point and goes, "Oh, what did that cop say to you when he was strangling you? Man, I don't fucking believe you. Man, I don't fucking believe you. Fantastic." He's just writing it all day.
It's almost like life is just this one big experience that he can kind of feed off to write the great American novel. I think that's Skip's kind of ultimate goal, is to be this great American novelist, and he's never really quite lived up to that expectation, has he? Not really, anyway.
This filthy, roach-ridden reality is inspiring. What did that second policeman say to you when he grabbed you by the throat?
Man, I don't fucking believe you.
Man, I don't fucking believe you. Fabulous.
You don't get it, Skip, do you? Huh? You think this is the Count of Monte Cristo or something, man? We're in trouble. This is the real deal. We're in deep shit.
Harry, you and I are innocent. You know that. I know that. And somewhere outside, the two guys who really pulled that bank job know it too.
But the cops don't know it.
Honey, you. Monroe.
I am entitled to a private interview.
Forget it.
Hello, sir. Are you here for us?
I believe so.
I'm Skip Donahue.
Yes.
This is my buddy, Harry Monroe.
Harry. Yes, I'm Len Garber, your court-appointed
What a
lawyer.
pleasure it is to see you.
Oh, do me a favor, sir. I need you to call this number for me. It's my girlfriend, Cindy Lunch. You don't know I'm here. They won't let me make a
This
phone
is very
call.
important to you.
Yes, well, of course I
Tell her
will.
I'll write her at her cousin's.
There's been a huge misunderstanding.
A huge misunderstanding.
Well, I am more or less familiar with the case.
You know that we're so innocent? Is there not some lightning stroke you can use to just cut through all this garbage? This isn't funny anymore. Do they know I hate confinement?
I don't care. Look, all I can do is shower them with motions and try to keep the prosecution off balance. I've already filed 2.
2? You've only filed 2 motions?
How about a dozen on me?
Look, the truth is we're dealing with armed robbery and bodily assault in this part of the country. You might as well have set fire to the Pentagon.
And Harry's like, he's trying to put on like a solid front, you know, doing that like, we're gonna act tough, we're in jail now. But as soon as they're confronted with like a big dude, he's like crying and whimpering.
Oh, we'll get to it, but when they come back to the cell. But anyway, we'll talk about that soon. Anyway,
But Pryor does that so good. Just that whimpering little pussy man. Like, a dude calls him a short ass, and he's like, yes, sir, yes, I'm a short ass. My father was a short ass, too.
It's quite funny. So they're being shipped off to jail. And actually, you've got that great scene, too, where they're all getting off the bus, and Skip doesn't quite know, like, what to do or like how to like present himself and
how to walk in the shackles, right? He just can't get the rhythm of it.
He can't get the rhythm of it. And he keeps kind of like talking back to the head jail guy, like who's leading the, and he keeps sort of saying to him that you're in a lot of trouble, mister, and stuff like that. You know, you can't treat me like this. You know what I mean? This is against the law.
Yeah, it's illegal, and he knows it.
Oh, it's funny. So we get to life in the maximum security prison, and life proves all too difficult for Skip and Harry. And after a failed attempt at faking insanity, which I'm assuming is that attempt when they're getting led from the bus, and they actually make it into the jail, and they're being led towards their cells, and Gene Wilder just totally freaks out, doesn't he? Totally freaks out.
It's like he has a sudden realization that they're actually in prison.
And he starts making his panicking sound again, and he like jump on the warden's back.
Yeah, he tries to ride him like a horse, and he's like, come on, giddy up, let's get out of here.
And then Richard Pryor kind of lures him from the jail, and he keeps like pleading with the wardens, just going, please, like, just let us off this time. He'll be fine. He's fine. He hasn't had his medication, and he pretends to like give him a pill and stuff. And to calm Wilder down. It's very, very funny. We're probably making it sound funnier talking about it than we actually watching it, truthfully.
Yeah. But they introduce some characters, you know, they actually do make some friends. They make some relatively nice people, actually, considering they're in prison. So the first one is Jesus Ramirez, who was also a bank robber. He's kind of funny, too, because he talks about, like, he was railroaded and sentenced for robbing 7 banks. And he's like, man, I was drunk, but I am pretty sure I only robbed 1 bank. And then there's this other guy, Rory, who was clearly a gay man.
Yeah.
Who killed his stepfather. And he's just constantly linking arms with Richard Pryor. It's like he doesn't want any part of it.
Like nothing at all, but Rory just kind of won't take no for an answer. And like, I don't think he does anything like highly inappropriate towards Harry, but I mean, you're right. You can tell Harry this clearly doesn't want anything to do with this guy. And to be truthful, they kind of use it for like comedy effect, like as this movie kind of goes on, yeah?
Yeah, there's a couple of points where he like smacks his hand off because he had his hand on the table. So he smacks it away, and then he goes, what are you in for? Well, I killed my stepdaddy, and he used to slap my hand. So Pryor just like puts it back on his hand. He's like, yep, it's all good.
That's it. So we meet Rory, we meet another guy named Jack Graham, who's a contrabandist, Jack Graham, but we also get introduced to a feed mass murderer named Grossberger. And it's this very funny scene where, and again, it's that typical kind of jail, they've all got to eat kind of scene. And I think Richard Pryor goes up to the guy dishing out the meals, and he says, I'd like a cheeseburger and some fries and a malt to go kind of thing, right? And the whole cheeseburger thing kind of sticks around for a little while because Rory keeps actually saying to Harry, he keeps going, I can get you a cheeseburger, you know. I can. You know what I mean? And Harry just so doesn't want a cheeseburger anymore.
He's like, you see that guy over there? He was an axe murderer. His name's Blade. He's the guy I'm going to get you a cheeseburger from. He's like, nope, don't want no cheeseburger. It's fine.
So we meet the mass murderer Grossberger, and he's like a big guy, isn't he? Like this guy, isn't he? He's very funny, actually. I quite like Grossberger in this film. He's played by this guy named, and he wasn't in many films and actually died when he was like 34 years old. I think he was actually quite young. Let me just try and find him for a sec. Erland van Lith. And believe it or not, as I said, he died when he was 34 years old in 1987, but this guy was an opera singer.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, no, he's definitely a big, intimidating guy, and he gets this this backstory about how he murdered his whole family, and then went and like murdered a bunch of people who reminded him of his family.
You got this really great scene where they're at the mess hall and they're being introduced to everyone, and all that kind of stuff happens with Harry and Rory and with the food. But Wilder becomes very fascinated with Grossberger because Grossberger kind of comes in and he intimidates everyone, doesn't he? Everybody, he'll sit down and the whole table will clear, and all he has to do is like look at someone or snarl even slightly, and everybody gets really, really scared. But Wilder is convinced that he's just lonely, isn't he? That's right. He's lonely. He just wants a friend, he says, doesn't he? He just wants a friend.
No one's truly talked to that man.
Yeah, exactly. No one's truly talked to that man. So he does. He tries to go and talk to him, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he just gets this big snarl and he runs off.
It's very funny, actually.
It is. But, okay, this is where the movie just takes a left turn. Because you're like, okay, so accused of the wrong crime, they've been put in prison, right? So they've settled in a bit. And then Skip and Harry decide that they're going to go to the warden's office, and because Skip has this list of like things that he wants, like I want a toilet seat and I want a cell with better ventilation, all that stuff. And they go in, and the warden is like, we've got this like initiation test that we put people through.
No.
You got to jump on the mechanical bull.
Yes.
So Skip, being the fun-loving guy that he is happy to get up there. And they end up putting it on, like, maximum power, and he's just not coming off. He's actually loving it.
And he doesn't even know, like, which way's, like, forward on the bull. Like, they do this gag where he's sitting the wrong way around, and the warden says, you got to go the other way around, and he goes to the other side, and then he says, no, you're facing the wrong way, and then he, like, kind of makes this joke. Now, throughout all of these discussions in the jail, Skip is relentlessly optimistic about almost every situation he gets put into, isn't he?
He really is. And the warden just lays out this thing about how they have a prison rodeo competition with like another prison. So Skip is going to be like his secret weapon. And they get to talking with Jesus and Rory, and they come up with this plan to use the rodeo to make an escape.
Yes.
So the first part of the plan is to actually let the warden have Jesus and Rory on the team so they can all go together. So Skip has to be relentless in saying, no, I'm not going to do it. And of course the warden and the crooked guards are going to put him through like a whole bunch of crap.
One of the crooked guards is Craig T. Nelson.
Yeah.
And he's actually quite good in the film. I mean, people might know him more from, obviously he's a very famous face, but he was, Mr. Incredible in The Incredibles. Like, he's got a really great voice, and I haven't seen him go back this kind of early. I mean, this film is from 1980, certainly one of his earlier kind of roles, yeah?
Oh, yeah, it would have to be as well. And they do have that side character played by Jonathan Banks. People would probably know these days from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
You know what? It's funny you say that, because I kept looking at that guy going, I know you from somewhere. I know exactly who you mean.
Yeah, he's like the guy who can get stuff in the prison, but he's like a real throwaway character. Like, there's really no reason for him to be there.
Even the warden, I know him from Northern Exposure. Like, I remember watching that show for quite some time, and he was like the guy in that show for a long time. And he's a very kind of familiar kind of character actor. Like, I certainly know who he is. Barry Corbin is the warden of Skip's jail, and as I said, Northern Exposure is where I know him from.
No, I didn't know that. I've never watched Northern Exposure.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. It's all right.
But anyway, Skip is pretty much being tortured by the guards, but he has to maintain his sense of wonderment about the whole thing, no matter what they do to him. So they do this whole sequence of, like, they suspend him in chains in the cell, and when they come back in, he says, oh, my 11-year-old back problem's gone. Thank you so much.
Did he say something like, I'm the luckiest man alive, I'm a lucky guy?
They throw him in, like, this solitary, which is like just a dog house thing for like 3 days. And when they open the door again, he goes, oh, just one more day, be a pal. I was really getting inside myself. I mean, come on. So they really go to the lengths, and they throw Grossberger in the cell with Harry and Skip.
That's the scene where Wilder walks back to the cell, and there's like Pryor standing there with Grossberger, and he's in tears, and he just looks at Wilder and he just says, help me, but he just mouths it. And it's very, very funny.
Wilder just like goes off to a corner. He's like, nope, I'm just gonna be over here for a while. But when the guards come back, they're sitting on the floor playing cards with Grossberger, talking about how they had to play cards because they tried to teach him how to play charades, but he didn't get it. Yeah. Like, he couldn't understand how to play it. And they're just having a great time playing cards. Oh, God, it's good.
It's really great. So once we kind of establish all this, we then end up back in the warden's office. And in order to kind of get, the cowboy from New York, as the warden is calling him, Harry issues these set of demands. And as you said before, it's like, I want A, B, C, D, and E on my team, and I want a better cell with more ventilation, blah, 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 blah. And the warden quickly agrees to this plan. But we also kind of learn too, after this is kind of agreed, the truth behind the rodeo. And we actually learn that it is actually a crooked operation run by another warden from a different jail who heads the neighbouring prison. And we actually learn that the money from the rodeo, which is actually supposed to go back to the prisoners, actually ends up in the warden's pockets. This is kind of where we get, Skip is not very happy about this.
Hello, Donahue. What can I do for you?
I'm ready to make a deal.
No? What kind of deal?
I want my own team. And I want a bigger cell with better ventilation.
Oh, what's the matter? Has Grossberger been farting on it?
Oh, settle down, Wilson. I don't make deals, Donahue.
Oh, I know that.
But I think in this case it might be arranged.
Good.
I want to win that trophy. I'm counting on you to go balls out for it.
I only have one speed. Balls out.
That's the spirit. You're going to be out of here while you're still a relatively young man.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that a lot.
Yeah, I guess we got ourselves a deal, huh?
I guess so.
Ride 'em, cowboy.
Okay.
I want an inmate guard on them every minute.
Graham will keep an eye on him.
Put Blade on Graham.
Right.
It almost reminds me of Shawshank in a way. Shawshank Redemption, this whole thing about, like, how about we get in here and we'll mess with the warden's money as well while we're at it. So that's where it's going to go by the end. Harry and Skip are then visited by Garber. Oh, the lawyer. The lawyer shows back up, and he has this cousin named Meredith. He says it's like a really good lawyer and will help them out. She's like a human rights activist or something. Which Wilder keeps making eyes at big time. So this is JoBeth Williams. Yeah, who's a reasonably well-known actress. Again, maybe not a name that you know, but you've certainly seen her face, yeah? She's been in quite a bit, yeah? Yeah, again, it's like, I know I've seen her face before. Can't quite pinpoint it, though. Well, she was in Poltergeist. She was in Kramer vs. Kramer. Of course, she was the mother in Poltergeist. That's where I know her. That's it. She was in Poltergeist 1 and 2. So there you go. And she's been in quite a bit of... She was in Dexter and 24. But again, as I said, maybe not a name you know, but certainly a face that you'd recognize. Yeah, but he just starts flirting with her relentlessly, talking about how he's just writing his big play and which he'd come to his opening night and yes, that's right. Stuff. But we also learn too that there's actually hope for them in jail, because they actually mention some little girl that witnessed this so-called robbery with the two woodpeckers earlier in the movie as saying that the people that actually committed the crime were not the same two that did the dance earlier on, which was Harry and Skip. But because of the girl's age, the court won't hear any new kind of testimony. They don't see her as like a viable kind of witness. But she actually gives them a little bit of information, sort of saying that the people that actually committed the crime had tattoos. And there's kind of like a bit of an opening there, isn't there? Yeah, a distinctive tattoo, like right on his hand. So she's decided that she's going to go and get a job at this country western strip club. Yeah, I know. Because, quote unquote, guys with tattoos hang out there. I know. It's so strange. And you kind of get isn't there the scene where she kind of identifies some guys that might be the two too, yeah? She kind of looks at them a bit funny, like they happen to, because these people can't go anywhere else, can't they? If you're going to commit a crime like that, you'd stay in your local town, wouldn't you? Exactly, you know, with that very distinctive tattoo right on your hand where everybody can see it.
Exactly. So she's doing this while Skip, Harry, Jesus, Rory, and Grossberger are actually acquiring the appropriate tools that they actually need for the escape, using the prison's metal shop to transform them into seemingly everyday items. So we're kind of setting the scene for the crew to essentially go to the rodeo to represent the jail, but also to stage their what's going to be big kind of breakout, isn't it? It doesn't seem like a very smart plan from the jail's perspective to let these people at a rodeo of all things. Yeah, like especially if they're saying Grossberger is like this knife-wielding, you know, murderer, and they're all these like terrible criminals, to actually put them back into society like that. It's a bit much, a bit of a stretch, isn't it?
It is. I mean, you know, they tried their best to make us come round to Grossberger. And it's funny and stuff, you know, they had a scene where Skip was playing on the guitar and then suddenly Grossberger breaks out and he's actually got like a really good voice and he's singing this Birmingham jail song. But at the same time, you're thinking like they're mounting this escape. Do we really want someone like Grossberger to escape with them? The dude murdered a lot of people. And, well, you know, skipping forward a bit, he doesn't actually escape with them, but still, you're like, you're kind of worried about that. I mean, it's bad enough that Jesus and Rory escape with them. Rory is a confessed murderer, and Jesus, well, he said he got railroaded over 7 robberies. He only committed 1, but still, he's guilty of robbing a bank. So they do escape with 2 admittedly guilty people.
So the rodeo actually begins, but the attempts to kill Skip actually fail. And like, as much as it's kind of ridiculous, it turns out that Skip is actually really good riding a bull, isn't he? Like, he's legitimately good and very, very skilled at it. That's what the movie's trying to tell you. And we get a few kind of incidents where I think that they put a lock on like the door of the bull thing, and obviously Skip is sitting on this very irate bull that can't escape and is getting angrier and angrier by the second, and they're very worried about Skip kind of getting killed. And Grossberger actually jumps out, rips the lock off the hook, and the thing kind of escapes. And they do a few other things too, don't they, if I remember right? I can't remember right now.
Yeah, well, it all seems a bit forced in my opinion, because, you know, naturally the warden wants Skip to win. There's a lot of money involved in this. But Craig T. Nelson and the guy from Breaking Bad,
you never really, actually I think you do learn his name, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
And they are kind of annoyed at Skip because of his optimism, because it's like he put forth so much effort trying to break Skip down but couldn't do it, that he just wants to kill the guy now.
Now, also remember too that during all this rodeo stuff, I mean, the rodeo is essentially a cover for the crew to kind of break out of the rodeo. I think they kind of work their way through the vents and end up in some kind of toilet, and they get changed and into like some kind of disguise. So you have Richard Pryor and Rory escaping first. So Richard Pryor kind of ends up as a cowboy with his big kind of beard on him, and he just, you know, walks straight past all the officers as if he's just part of the crowd. And Rory kind of gets himself into female drag throughout it as well. And again, he just kind of walks straight past it. I think he's walking on Richard Pryor's arm, isn't he? Which is quite a funny gag, actually, when you think about it. And they have to kind of then make their ways to like other toilets in the area and actually provide clothes and stuff for the other inmates like Jesus and wanted to kind of get in there as well. And so whilst all this is kind of happening, we have Harry escape, we have Rory escape, and Jesus as well. And Wilder is the last one to escape, right? So it actually turns out too that Wilder actually has this discussion with the opposing rodeo champion from the other jail. And he's actually sort of saying to him, look, this is unfair, you know, and they do this thing where the bull kind of escapes. It's almost like the bull's attacking them. It's kind of this really weird sequence where you actually see Wilder without his shirt on. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Which I thought was just odd. Yeah. Like I've never thought of Wilder. And did you notice the bad body doubles that they had?
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. They they sort of give this one guy like frizzy curly hair.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
just like, no, that's Gene Wilder now. Like, he's out there with the bull getting charged at.
So they kept going to these like mid shots that had no bull in any way whatsoever of Wilder. And then they'd cut to these wild shots with this guy who had frizzy hair but was clearly a different body type. Like he was a muscly guy and it just wasn't the same person.
He's a bit of a bigger dude, right? But yeah, he does. He talks this guy, Caesar Geronimo. He's the reigning champion, and he kind of talks him into, we're going to have the money here. Because what they're doing is like some sort of like showdown.
Yeah.
Or something. They've actually strapped the money to the head of the bull, and one of them has to grab it off. So he's like, how about I help you? I'll distract the bull. You get it. But why did we want to give the money back to the warden? Like, they're not going to help us. And the guy just like throws it out into the crowd, creating a big, big
ruckus. Yeah.
Exactly. So he can be the last one to escape. So Skip will be the last one to escape.
So Skip escapes and ends up in some van with these two random people that are helping them for some reason.
I think it's Jesus' wife or something.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say, I think it's Jesus' like family of some description, yeah? So they're driving along and the lawyer and the cousin are driving in the opposite direction. And for whatever reason, the cousin is like daydreaming about Skip. And he sees Skip in this van that's driving on the other side of the road.
Because he just sticks his like head through the mid-partition or something. Just randomly like sticks his head out just as they drive past and see him.
So the lawyers literally cause like a big accident, like out of nowhere, saying, I'm in a rush. I've got to get back to that person. They finally catch up to the car and they connect with Harry and Skip again. Meanwhile, Jesus and Rory all escape. Harry and Skip connect with the lawyers again, and the lawyers actually tell them, which I thought this was the strangest ending, to be truthful, man. I didn't quite expect them to kind of get off. The lawyers say, you're free to go, you're a free man. They found the right guys. So, which implies like their escape attempt was not counted at all. Like, you know what I mean?
know. It's like kind of like, I'm pretty sure it's illegal to escape from jail, right?
Yes.
But they would still have to go to court and argue that the only reason they were put in the position to escape from jail was because they were wrongfully convicted. There would have to be some sort of legal process to officially release them from prison. They can't just be like, hey, we escaped. Oh, it doesn't matter because, we found the right guys anyway. So
we better get out of the state before they change their mind. Oh, to be truthful, man, I thought it was a bit of it felt lazy, and a little thrown together. Like, I don't know, it felt the whole rodeo as a cover and this posse to escape storyline felt a bit forced. I would have been more than happy for them just to serve their time in jail. There'd be a whole bunch of gags for 90 minutes, and for whatever reason they get out of jail at the end when the two, I would have been more than satisfied.
Exactly. Just kind of them in prison doing the hard time while the lawyers are outside trying to find the guys or something like that. Why did we need the rodeo?
Why did we need the rodeo? As soon as the rodeo showed up, I can't lie, man, I grimaced just a little bit.
It's WTF, right? It's like, what? A rodeo? What?
A rodeo, and they're going to have some competition with the rival prison from across town.
It's a bit summer camp movie, isn't it?
Yeah, it just, I don't know, man. I think Wilder and Pryor do their best, though, yeah?
Oh, they do.
Particularly Wilder. And in fact, I'd probably argue Pryor actually doesn't really have a whole lot to do in the second half of this film. Definitely not.
I know. He kind of just gets dressed up as a rodeo clown and...
That's about it.
That's about it. Yeah, he escapes.
He's just along for the ride. They don't really use his comedic chops all that often.
There's maybe like one sight gag where he's like sweating a bit while the others are escaping, and he kind of wipes his face down and pulls the beard off his chin. That's like the one sight gag that I thought was actually kind of funny during that whole section.
How did you get out?
Busted out.
But you're free.
You're damn right we're free.
No, I mean they caught the other two guys.
Thanks to Meredith.
You mean we're really free? We're free! Yeah! We're free! We're free! You're a hell of a lot.
Thanks.
We're free!
Yes, and good luck. Thanks.
Thanks for everything.
It's okay.
get out of this state before somebody changes their mind.
Aren't you forgetting something?
What?
What about my opening night?
Am I still invited?
Holy mackerel! How many times do I have to ask you?
As I said, if it just kind of went down like a slightly different path, I think it would have been a lot better a film. But in saying that, though, going back to our segment of, ratings recommend, I would still border on recommend this film because I thought there were enough gags in it. I thought Gene Wilder does a very good job as a comedian. I think he's really funny in this film because his relentless optimism. I love the choice that is made for this film because his relentless optimism is the gag that kind of keeps on giving throughout the whole film, and I think it works quite well.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's really doing a great job, and honestly, I think the scenes between the two of them, like when they're together and they're just riffing on each other, that's the best parts of this movie.
Like even in that scene where they're playing poker or doing something with Grossberger in the scene, like Pryor is like hiding cards, and you can tell that felt improvised. It didn't feel like, you know what I mean? Like they may have set it up slightly, but you could tell that the kind of rapport between them was very genuine.
And it's like you said, the ending's just like a very tacked on, hey, we've reached 90 minutes, let's get out of here kind of thing.
Dude, 90 minutes, man. This film is an hour 52, man.
Oh, really?
It's just shy of 2 hours, dude.
It feels like it's less.
They could have trimmed a couple of minutes here and there and kind of made it a little bit tighter.
Well, then like I said, like the whole tacked on thing with Meredith running off with them. And you're just like,
I know.
Why? Just so Gene Wilder could make out with her and off they drive into the sunset? Whatever.
Anyway, but as I said, going back to ratings recommend, I am bordering on a recommend for this film. If I had to kind of give it a good score, I'd probably give it 6.5 Wilders. I think that's kind of where I'm about with this. What do you think, man? What's your rating?
I'm actually right there with you. 6.5, I think, is spot on for this movie. So I'm going to give it 6.5 cheeseburgers.
Yeah, nice. Cheeseburger. That's awesome, dude.
It's funny. It's got its funny moments. The storyline, yeah, it's up and down. It's all over the place a lot of the time.
If you put two different leads, if Wilder and Pryor weren't the leads of this film, I don't think it would hold up at all.
Oh, definitely not.
I think Wilder really does a good job in this film. And truthfully, man, I'm actually looking forward to next week's film.
So next week, we leap forward 9 whole years. 1989's See No Evil, Hear No Evil.
Yeah, nice.
Which is the one that I've been waiting for. This is like, out of the 4 movies we're talking about, this is the one I've seen the most. And not to give too much away, I think this is actually the funniest of the 4.
All right, well, let's hold on to next week's episode.
Yeah.
So that's it for this episode of the Rewatch Podcast. Keep up with listener interaction by joining our Facebook page at facebook.com/Rewatch Podcast, or follow the show on Twitter at RewatchPod, and visit our webpage rewatchpodcast.podomatic.com.
And remember, you can always write us an email or record a voice message and send it over to therewatchpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you've enjoyed the show, please consider giving us a rate and review on iTunes. And you can also help support the show by heading over to patreon.com/rewatchpodcast to make a monthly contribution as little as $1. Thank you very much. Of course, we're also up on YouTube. You can find our whole back catalogue. Just search Rewatch Podcast and subscribe today. All right. That's 2 down. 2 out of 4 down. It's been solid so far, I have to say. Absolutely.
If you've got any ideas for any future shows you'd like us or series to review, don't forget to email us at the Gmail website where we're keen to hear from you, aren't we?
Yeah, we don't get a lot of feedback, but when we do, we absolutely love to hear your
if you've
opinion.
got any ideas about TV shows or movie series that you want me and Corey to kind of delve into, you would be very happy to kind of take your opinions on board and consider them, yeah?
Yeah, no doubt. All right, well, I guess it just leaves me to say until next time. Did you know there was a revolution in 65? We all went to sleep and missed it.
125 years? Oh, God. I'll be 161 when I get out.
The Rewatch Podcast is not associated with the copyright holders of these films, and no copyright infringement is intended.
Now listen to me. I know that this is a delicate situation, but let's talk a little sense.
use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes as provided in Title 17, aka Fair Use. Music provided by Kevin McCloud at incompetech.com. Copyright 2016, The Rewatch Podcast.
I hope you had fun, because I ain't gonna have no fun.
Hi, Rewatch Podcast listeners. I'm Corey.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Nathan.
First off, let me say that we have all had a blast doing the Rewatch Podcast. Every week, we put out another episode for free for you. And although we enjoy these discussions with each other, we truly do this for you guys out there in podcast land.
That's right, Corey. But we are here today to tell you about Patreon. Every week, there are costs involved in podcasting about film and television, including hosting and bandwidth charges, our own personal internet usage, and film or show rentals and purchases. So, we're asking you to become a Patreon supporter.
If you can afford as little as $1 to throw our way per month, it would really help us keep the lights on. And if you want to send $100 our way every month, we wouldn't turn that down either. But it's your choice, and we appreciate the support you bring.
As always, we strive to bring you the best quality shows we can create, and we hope that you enjoy them. So head on over to patreon.com/rewatchpodcast to become one of our patrons and show your support for the Rewatch Podcast.
And if we get enough patrons, we may even be able to produce exclusive content just for the supporters in the form of simply getting episodes before the main feed release, or even bonus film discussion episodes as a thank you for your support. The website again is patreon.com/rewatchpodcast.
Thanks, everyone.